Thanks, Brianna. Brianna said, my name is Jason Boss. I'm an application developer at Customer FX, and I am going to spend the next, hopefully an hour here, talking about the SData API for SalesLogix. As was mentioned, this is going to be the first in a series of them. I'm not sure how many this ultimately will be, but there'll be at least one more, and probably a couple more after this. This initial one will mostly just give an overview of what SData is, and then get into some basics in terms of the construction of the URL, and then also how to return data from SData into a .NET application. As an example, I'm obviously not going to be teaching how to necessarily use .NET, but hopefully this will give a good example of how SData information can be consumed via an external application. Okay, so to start, I wanted to give just a brief overview of SData. SData is a web-enabled API for SalesLogix that allows you to interact with SalesLogix data from an external application or website. It is implemented via RESTful web services, which means you're not limited to using SData with any particular technology. It doesn't have to be .NET. It could be really anything that you're comfortable with. The data from SData is returned as an ATOM feed containing both the data from whatever entity you're returning, as well as an XML description of the data structure. And ultimately, these are deployed from Application Architect as a web portal. Okay, so with SData, returning this information as an XML, you have the ability to consume that if you're familiar with XML, really in any way you want. However, Sage does provide a client library in order to make a lot of this easier, and that's one of the things we'll be covering here in this call. Now, SData consists of well, you can return SData via URL. SData is a portal for SalesLogix that's deployed similarly to the SLX web portal or the customer portal, and that portal then can be called via a URL, as we can see here. Now, this URL has a couple different parts, and I just wanted to discuss briefly what these parts consisted of here. First of all, we have the server and port, which is the first items, and obviously that's the server address and port of your SalesLogix web development. Second to that, we have SData, and that is basically your deployment folder for the SData portal. This portal basically resides in a folder named SData, which should be next to your SLX client portal on your web server. The next component of this URL is SLX, and that's the application name. SData is SData is a specification it's actually used by various different Sage applications, not necessarily just SalesLogix, but this defines that it's being used in SalesLogix. Dynamic is the contract name, and I'm not going to get into contracts in too much detail here, but basically SData, the SData deployment can support several different integration contracts, but for now we're just going to stick with dynamic. The next portion of that link is just a dash, and that is essentially just the data set that is going to be used. The dash is the default, so we're going to stick with that here for right now. And then finally, it shows accounts, which is it's an entity, but with SData, it's called a resource, and that's the resource that this particular link is accessing. Now, what I'd like to do is show you briefly here what I am talking about. Let me see if I can share the right thing. There we go. Okay, so basically, what we have here is I'm looking at the SData tab for the account entity within SalesLogix, and we can see in here that there are it shows you a number of sort of sample URIs that sort of display how, various different ways you can return data in here. It shows your base URI and some other items just dealing with account, but then also, since account has various different extended entities and child and parent relationships and so on, there are also it also lists kind of sample versions of some of those links as well. And so essentially within SData, here I have a browser open, and actually if I just pull this all off and I just go down here to the data set, so get rid of everything up to the dash. Oops. Excuse me one moment. This will essentially show all the resources that are available through SData. So in essence, these are all the entities that are currently being published to the SData portal from SalesLogix. And so now we can actually click into, say, accounts, for example, and this will show various different some basic information for accounts that are in this SData feed for accounts, and we can actually even right-click on this and look at the paid source, and this will show the XML definition of the source that we're looking at. And I'll scroll down a little bit here, and we can see here that we're starting to look at some actual account records from this SData payload, and this this has a key which represents an account ID in this case, and then also this this also shows various different properties for the payload and the value of those properties. So we see here we have the account name, and in this case it's ADCS Industries, and really so on and so forth. Our crate fields and industry and so on. So essentially, this is what's being returned via SData. And again, if you're familiar with XML, if you program with XML, you certainly can break this down on your own. But again, they provide some tools for you to make this a little bit easier in the form of a client library that will let you work with that. So we let's see here. Sorry, let me switch back to PowerPoint. As far as setting up SData for custom entities in the application architect, there's really not a whole lot you need to do. The SData tab, which we had looked at previously in Application Architect, that actually is, and I'll go back to that here. Okay, so within Application Architect, as you can see, we're on the SData tab, and there's a couple different checkboxes on here. And those checkboxes, this first one, probably the most important one, is the Generate Feed checkbox, and all that does is says that this entity should be included within SData as a resource. Now, by default, when you create a new entity, this is going to be on anyway. So there's really nothing you need to do to turn it on when you create a new entity. However, you can certainly come in here and turn it off if you would like to. Within the SData tab also there's a path name, and that's going to be the name of the resource that you're ultimately using. That's essentially this value within the link that I'm highlighting there. And in addition, there are 3 different checkboxes: can post, can put, and can delete. And basically these are just the post essentially represents the ability to create a new record or to insert a record. The put is a method to update a record, and then obviously the delete is a method to delete the record. So in terms of actually setting this up in SalesLogix, actually setting up SData for an entity, this is really all there is to it. And again, this is on by default, so there's not a whole lot to do there. within the deployment, if I look at the core portals, you'll see there is an SData item in here as well. So if you made modifications to what entities are available, you would obviously you of course would need to deploy the SData portal as well as the client portal. And actually, you know what I should say, SData can function on its own. You don't necessarily have to be using the web client in order to use SData. You could have a fully LAN implementation, but then still an application architect define various entities for SData. So you could just be publishing this particular excuse me a second, this particular application, and then you're good to go with SData. So going back to my presentation here. And this is really just what I just talked about. The SData tab, again, is on by default. The post is the insert method. The put is the update method. And the delete is the delete method. Okay, so once you have a given entity set up, or if you're using one of the default entities that are already set up, in order to be able to use this externally, within a .NET application, there's a couple things we'll want to do here. First of all, using this, as I said before, you can certainly parse that data yourself, but it is much easier using the client library provided by Sage. In order to get that client library, you can do one of a couple things. You can either go up to GitHub. If you're not familiar with that, that is it's a sort of a collaboration, an online collaboration site that allows you to share and collaborate on a given project. And actually, I can even show you that here. Oops. And you know, this is a free sign up, of course. Sorry, I forgot my own password. So I can look, let's see. So we have, what am I looking for? See, actually, you know what? SData is what I want to look for. And I'm going to provide links to some of the things that I'm going to be looking at here. Actually, they'll be in this PowerPoint presentation, which will be made available after this meeting. So these items you can certainly get from there, from the PowerPoint presentation after this is done here. Those links will be available. But basically, it has a repository for the C#, the SData C# client library. So you can grab that from this site. The other option. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I'm not even showing you what I'm talking about here. One second. Okay, so this is GitHub's website, and I'm looking at Sage's SData C# client library. You can, if you're on GitHub, you can actually just search for SData, and it'll bring you here. Basically, the search will return this, and it should be the first item on there. The other way that you can add this in, and the way that I'll demonstrate here today, is you can also use Nougat. Nougat Package Manager, which is a add-on to Visual Studio from Microsoft. And let's see here, I'll show you that as well. And I'll provide a link to Nougat as well. There we go. This is basically this is just Microsoft's website as where you get this. It's from the Visual Studio Gallery, and you can just download this and install it, and you should be pretty much all set to use that. Within, let me show you how to actually do this here. So back to my image here. Within, start up a new project. Now in this case I've already installed the Nougat package manager, so we don't have to go through that step. Just give this a second to load up. Okay, so I'm going to create a new project, and this is just going to be a really simple console application. Nothing really fancy here. We'll get into a little more detail in some future webinars. So basically, I just have a simple C# console application. I'm just going to call this SData console app. And that should be all I need to do here. Okay, so now within Visual Studio, within References, I can right-click, and now that I've installed Nougat, there is an option here for Manage Nougat Packages. So I'll just go ahead and click that. And something's goofy with my Visual Studio. It makes me save after I've created it. So you probably won't have to do this step if you're trying to build an application, but I apparently do. So I'm just saving it. And once that's saved, I should be able to actually add it here. So within References, again, I'll go to Manage Nougat Packages, right-click that. And what this does, and you obviously if you're using Visual Studio not familiar with Nougat, there are various different add-ons and plugins from various different vendors that you can call from in here. But in this case, we're just interested in SData. Whoops. So if I type that in the search, then what should come up is the SData C# client library. Once that's there, it's just a matter of clicking Install, and that will go ahead and install this into my application. And now that that's finished, I can close it. And you can see here that it has added a sage.sdata.client reference to the application. Now that we have this, we're going to want to add, excuse me one moment, we're going to want to add a couple of using statements in here. Okay, so basically we'll need to add 3 in addition to what's already here. Oops. Okay, so we're going to add Sage SData client, the core namespace. In addition, we want to use the Atom namespace because we're looking at Atom feeds. And then finally, we're going to add the client extensions one as well. So client extensions. So I'll add that in there, and now we're basically all set to be able to use SData within our application. So I'm going to go ahead and start throwing some code in here. The first thing we're going to want to do is we need to provide connection information, or not. I'm sorry, not connection information, but user authentication information. We didn't see it on here because I already had it open. But if I let's see, if I actually just typed in the URL to account, for example, and let's make this easy by copying and pasting this in. I'm not sure if this will show this since I was logged into it previously, but so if I throw this in, and again, I'm just trying to look at accounts under localhost. Yeah, I'm sorry, it doesn't do it since I've already have been logged into it. But if I hadn't been in the browser here before looking at this link, it would have prompted me for a username and password, which would be a SalesLogix username and password, either admin or a user. However, that didn't occur in here because I had already been logged into this SData feed. But within our application, we'll want to provide that in here. So in order to do that, we're going to we're going to, well, what we need is we need the SData service, which provides the service location of user authentication values. So within here, I'm just going to do a new SData service. And this will basically just be, well, essentially my URL. And then finally here we're going to want to pass a username and password. In this case I'm just going to use the admin user, which in the case of this database doesn't have a password. So I'll just do a username and then a blank password. And of course, being an application, this is certainly something you can pass in. This particular app isn't going to have any user control since it's a console application, but you could do a form application and then provide a login screen so that a given user could log in, and then that's also going to honor any sort of user security that's in place as well. If there are certain records that a user doesn't have access to or does have access to, then their feed will only return things based on the security model in SalesLogix. So now that we have this here for admin, we need to tell it what kind of resource we want to access. In this case, I'm going to do contacts. So basically here, this resource will need to match the value on the SData tab, the entity, that value that I had shown you before here, basically this path name item, except I'll be looking at contacts instead. So let me actually open that. So under contact, it is called contacts. So within the application here, we're just going to do, let's see, we're going to do, we already have our, whoops, and create a variable to create the request. And to that, we're actually going to pass the SData service that we had created in the line above that. So I'll go ahead and throw this in, and let's call this REQ, and this will be a new SData resource, collection request. And again, we're gonna and again we're just going to pass in the service that we had created previously. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot a major thing here. I need to actually give this a variable. That should be a little bit better. So now we'll pass that service variable in here. Forgive my typing. Okay, so now that we have that created, the next step we want to do is, I think I'd already said it before, we want to tell what resource we want to access, which would be contacts in this case. So we'll just look at our collection request, and we'll get the resource kind, and we'll just set that to contacts. So now basically what we've done is we've created a data service to SData, and with the user authentication, and then made a collection request and defined that collection request as being for the contacts entity. Now what we can also do, and this is actually optional, but I'm going to throw it in anyway. We can throw in any sort of criteria that we want as far as what will be returned with the data, and this will be. I'll keep this really simple at this point. I'll go into some other sort of query examples in the next webinar. But for here, or for now, we'll just do. Let's see. We want to set the query values. So we'll just do a query values add, and we can just put in where, and then we'll just do last name like where is, oh, there you go. So we'll just do last name like A, so this will return any contacts whose last name starts with the letter A. So we have that in there. And really, you know, there is, I should show you this as well. As far as a resource to find out what sort of options are available in here, there is a specification page from Sage, which lists all these items. And let's see here, I can show you that here quick. Okay, so this is the Sage site that shows the it actually also shows how the definition of what's in a URL, and then also has some operators and various different items as well. This probably is not a bad probably not a bad idea to take a look through this at some point. However, it's a little more than we're kind of covering today. And again, this link will be provided after this webinar. So back to our application. There we go. Okay, so back to our application. The next thing we're going to want to do in here, let me bring my notes back up. Okay, so now that we have, we've kind of defined our collection request and said what resource and some criteria. Basically, we just want to read that data we want to read that data or run the query that we've defined. So to do that, we'll just create a new Atom feed variable. Let's call that feed, and we'll just read what we have there. Okay, and also, okay, so now that we have our Atom feed, basically what we want to do is just to loop through this payload. It is called a payload in SData, and then return field values for each item returned in that payload. So within here, I'm just going to do a quick for each statement. And I'll do for each Atom entry. I've done something wrong there. Okay. Let's see, and now that we have this for each statement, by the way, I did just see the question that I might have forgotten to share when I was showing GitHub, so I'll go back and show that at the end as well. Okay, so for each Atom entry in feed entries, we're basically going to get the payload for that entry, and we're just going to create a new SData payload variable. Let's call that payload. And we're going to call a get SData payload method within here. Now that we have the payload, we're going to want to actually read the values from that payload. So in this case, I'm just going to grab a couple things. I'll do a string of count. just call account name. And the the names that I'm calling here, the property names, these are, you really need to find these. You can always look again like I did before when I looked at the source of this page. These are the property names within the SData feed. These should be the same as as what actually is defined as property names in SalesLogix, so you can probably go by those. But you can always view the source here if you want to be sure. So I'm using account name in this case. So I'll grab the account name. I'll just convert that to a string here. And then I'll just grab the contact name as well. Oh, I see what I'm doing wrong here. Sorry, these need to be brackets instead of parentheses. There we go. Okay, so now for contact, I'm just going to grab the name LF property. Again, I'll just convert that to a string as well. And then really after that, all we need to do, we've defined our payload, and we've started to read values from that payload, so we can actually just write those off to our console. Let's do a quick console write line. Actually, let's just do this here. Oop, not that. I already have some of this code written here, so I'm just kind of retrofitting what I have. That one. Okay, so basically we're just going to return a contact name from whatever their account is. I'm not sure why it doesn't like contact name. There we go. And then since it's a console app, we have to do a read line to get it to pause after we return what we return. Oops. Okay, so on a very basic level, we've created an application, a console application, just to return account contact names from SalesLogix. So if I go ahead and run this, go ahead and save it first. Excuse me. But if I go ahead and run this now, we should see our console, which in a moment here should return some data. And it didn't like something that I did. Oh, I'm sorry. These are, when we're referring to property names, they are case sensitive in here. So I know that last name happens to be capital L, capital N. So that needs to be that when you refer to it here. So let me just stop this and resave it and restart it. Now, if we start that up, we are now getting a list of any account within SalesLogix that admin has access to that begins with the letter A. So that is not too bad as far as returning data from SData. It's fairly simple. Now, of course, this is just a basic console application. You could certainly do a Windows application in which you're giving login information, and you have a search box where you return all accounts that match a particular search criteria that you could pass in here. But as far as just a simple example, hopefully this gives you an idea of what can be displayed in there. Let's see. Okay, so essentially that's what I wanted to show you as far as the SData stuff. There's a couple links that I've discussed previously and shown some of them, but I'll go through them one more time. And let's see here. Oops. Ah, my apologies. There we go. Okay, so the links I'm showing here, and before I post this after this webinar is done, I'll also include the URL for our YouTube site for the recording that'll be up there. So there's a few different links. I talked about most of these, but not all of them. The first one is actually the SData series from our website. Is written by Ryan Farley, and a lot of the information that I've gone through is actually available up there as well. I'll go ahead and click this, but I don't think you're seeing that, so let me change that as well. This is a good resource for you. Basically, there's a couple different items in here, from the overview all the way down to running queries and using nested payloads. Basically, I've covered the first 3 items that are in this list, but this is certainly a good resource to go back on and kind of double check what I've gone through. In addition to that, we have the Nougat package installer, which I did show previously. And that looks like this, and at this link. And again, these will all be in the PowerPoint presentation, so you don't have to remember this URL. But to download it, then you can download this from here and then install it to use in Visual Studio. And then also, this is the Git repository for Sage CRM on GitHub. So this is available to you from here as well if you didn't want to use Nougat to install that into your application. Finally, I have listed the SData core specifications, which I showed you previously, which has basically lists the details of the query language and various different items for SData, some sort of advanced stuff that I'll be covering in some future items here. And that's about all I had as far as links. Like I said, I'll go ahead and I'll add in the link for our YouTube channel as well, so you can check that out as well. And I think that is about all I had for you today. I didn't see any additional questions come up. If there was anything that you wanted to ask at this point, now would be a good time. I'll just kind of yammer on here for a second to see if any come in, but I don't think we're going to get anything new here. I just wanted to see if there was anything else that I wanted to mention, or I think that this is probably as advanced as I wanted to get for an introductory item. The next one that we do will be in about a month, and I'll start to get into some more advanced querying besides from just using a starts with to, as I did on this one, and we'll also get into using what I'll start doing is I'll start building a Windows application, a Forms application, so that we have something a little more usable and something that makes a little more sense. as far as a usable application. So at the very least, we'll be covering that in the next one, and probably in a third one that'll come in a couple months. Start getting into some more advanced items, probably some nested payloads and other items within SData. So basically, that is about it.